What's happening, everybody? Welcome back to the show. We are your hosts, Chase and Myles, and we are at the Lucky Duck. So we got a next guest on. His name is Matthew Edwards.
Woo!
Welcome.
Hey, thanks.
Hello.
Welcome to the show.
Good to be at the Lucky Duck.
Yeah, we flew you out here, all expenses paid, right?
Yes. The premium package.
Yeah, exactly. The VIP package.
We had jumbo shrimp and stuff.
Yeah.
Back. Cool.
Instead of giving a well-written intro like we usually do to our guests, we're kind of just gonna throw you in here, and I'll give you all you good people of the internet a little backstory. I know Matt because we met. What was it, like 4 or 5 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
Almost 6.
Ballpark, yeah.
Yeah. And you used to live out here, and you were doing what out in Denver at the time?
Finishing my master's in social work.
Yeah.
And working at a day treatment center for people with disabilities and autism. And then I changed jobs to go to esports.
Yeah, you did esports for a while.
And then I moved out to LA.
Yeah, and then I never heard from you again. How dare you? No, I'm just kidding.
And then now you're here.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, that's so yeah, let's get into that a little bit. You so you were helping kids and minors who had autism, disabilities, etc., and you were behavioral coaching almost?
Yeah. So working at a day treatment center in school for people with developmental disabilities, but primarily autism.
Yeah.
And the age group I worked with mostly was young adults. So teenagers, children, but also young adults. Kind of transitioning for life skills, job skills,
Yeah.
independent living skills, things like that.
This
But
is
then
during the week.
Yeah.
You're doing this.
His
Yeah.
day job.
So these kids didn't go to a normal public or private. Well, I guess it's kind of a private school.
Yeah, so they were dropped off with us, normal school hours, like 8-ish to 4-ish.
Okay, gotcha. And what's different between what you're doing and what? So you said it's a what kind of treatment center?
Day treatment. So
Day treatment.
the patients and clients are brought in during the day. They don't stay overnight,
Mm-hmm.
things like that.
And
Sounds
the
like a spa.
Yeah.
Day treatment center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it like that?
There's
Yeah.
some similarities. Massages and
Yes.
And so, I
Heavy
mean, we
sensory.
know kids with autism stuff, they have some issues, but what exactly are you trying to treat?
yeah, basically behaviors that wouldn't be allowed in society at its most basic level. So behaviors that you'd get in trouble for as a citizen within this country, either because they can't happen during classrooms, they're disruptive during classrooms, or in relation to police or other main, societal functions like that. So basically working on those behaviors that are going to get these people into trouble through the law eventually.
Yeah.
But also trying to help increase autonomy, increase independence, maybe increase contributions to their family systems at home. Even learning to help do the dishes to help make life easier for mom and dad who you're staying with is a big deal.
Yeah.
For some families. So, yeah. But then also we even worked on like getting and maintaining jobs.
Yeah.
I think for us, it was mostly stocking. It's like stocking shelves and kind of like organizing and categorizing things.
Yeah.
Which is kind of one of the more common strengths that our demographic had, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yep.
What was the age range of these guys?
Mine were back then were 17 to 22, which I really like that age range.
Okay.
That young adult.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And were most of the people coming in, was it that they've had an issue before in class or with the law, or maybe they're just their parents are having issues at home?
Yeah. Usually it's like they've been in their schools, but there's significant challenges or disruption in their schools to where their schools don't really feel like they can continue that. It's maybe, it's the classic situation of one student in a classroom of 20 or 30 is requiring so much resources from the school or the teacher that it's kind of like not good for the overall group, so to speak, in terms of like, are we getting to our concepts on time? Are we hitting our curriculum on time? Also, but also even things like, is our classroom a safe place? Are the other students and peers like comfortable? You know, so yeah.
Did you ever have any safety concerns?
For me, myself?
Yeah.
No, fortunately, because I'm really lucky that I'm a large sports playing male and I'm really sturdy and I don't really have like any health complications. So I'm just kind of like, you know, I'm like a body that can be thrown into more dangerous situations and things like that. And unfortunately, I don't really feel concerned for my own safety, you know, compared to playing collegiate level sports.
Yeah, you played rugby, right? And water polo.
Oh, really?
Yeah, rugby and water polo and things. So you put me up with a 15-year-old that has a certain behavior that they're used to. When they do the behavior, you know, it serves a certain type of function to kind of get them what they want. I'm not usually worried about what that behavior looks like.
Have you ever come up against one of your candidates and they were like super strong, like gorilla strong, and you're like, damn, dude, like, holy shit.
I do have there is one.
That's surprising. You surprised me.
yeah
Come up and like,
well, I think of two clients. One who was just a larger person, right, and his thing was kind of like a rhino charge. Kind of when he was, you know, in kind of fight or flight mode, when it was like, it's time to put up, I really want to get my way, I don't feel comfortable or safe in this situation, whatever it would be, whatever
rhino charge you.
Yeah.
It's a good move.
Yeah.
If you're a superhero.
Yeah. So you had to be wary of the charge distance and the momentum gained versus how far has the person moved.
Like,
wouldn't that be awesome if he actually thought of that thing? He's like, he stepped back and he's like, all right, let's do this.
We do.
Let's charge you.
We think of those variables.
Or you do, but maybe not him.
Yeah. But there have been cases when I'm working with younger, smaller patients and clients that will show strength that I totally don't expect.
Yeah.
And I totally don't anticipate. And I think a lot of my understanding of that has been a lack of regard for the other human in that example on the behalf of those people, where it's like, I'm almost fighting. It almost feels for me like I'm fighting for my life. So I don't care about your well-being in this case. I'm going to come out maximum power, maximum effort, compared to like you or me, where we might kind of moderate our intensity a little bit more.
Yeah, more self-aware, I guess. Yeah. That's interesting. Do you find that some of the people you work with have like really gifted skills, like artistically?
Yeah, maybe things like memory recall in some ways. Yeah, or memory recall, I would say, would be the most common one, which has even been popularized in some media, like Rain Man, right? Kind of the obsessive, compulsive, looking up and researching. What was he? Did you guys see that movie, Rain Man?
Yeah. It's been a while, but yeah. He would
look up the rates of crash.
Was it?
Yeah. Okay. He would look up like crash rates and statistics for flying.
Oh shit.
And he would memorize and know all of them from years and years and years and years and years.
Yeah.
But how he would spend his time is looking up those things, and then he'd be able to just regurgitate it off the top. And if you had no idea how he spends his time, you'd be like, how do you have that ability? But when you realize, this person spends a really significant portion of their life going over these things.
That's so interesting.
It starts to click.
Some people are gifted with like photographic memory, and I don't get it. It's the most amazing thing. Like I had a coworker, and his wife, he said she had the most amazing memory. He said she would remember the phone number of a pizza place from 15 years ago on a road trip. They would like stop in the middle of this like random town for the night in the middle of a road trip, and they would just like, oh, what do you want to eat? Oh, let's just get some pizza. So they called this pizza place. She would remember that phone number of that pizza place like 15 years ago.
That's crazy.
Like she could recall that number.
Yeah. Or like knowing so many digits of pi or something.
Yeah.
It's wild.
It's incredible the strengths of the human mind.
Yeah.
In some
I think
degrees.
some people can learn that, right? Like there's
Memory?
probably people who are gifted at it, but yeah, learn how to better memorize things.
Don't you do that? Don't you do that when you like go through grade school? Like that whole time you're in grade school, most of it's just memorizing stuff.
A lot of it.
But if you're not training your brain to better memorize it,
The recall.
Yeah.
You do a pretty good job at that.
I'm okay. I wouldn't say I'm better than the average citizen in the U.S.
But you've displayed to me like systems of remembering things.
Yeah, so there are strategies you can use, and that's kind of like what you were mentioning. Like, for example, you could research something called a PEG system to strengthen your memory in a certain way, where you kind of like create little devices and tricks to remember things more better.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Hmm.
So what made you want to get into this field, like of helping kids with autism?
I think part of it also is that my major in undergrad was psychology. And I think where those two things came from in my more formative years when I was younger is I was always interested in seeing if I could guess the way people would be or the way people would act. I guess even just in friends groups, you know, you go through middle school and high school and things like that, and you start to wonder if you can anticipate your friends that are around you, right? What will he do in this situation? What will he say? And then that turned into a fascination with why do humans do the things that humans do? Mm-hmm. And then I went to college and I learned about behavioral psychology. And then it equipped me with kind of all of the behavior science knowledge of like predicting behavior, understanding how, you know, behavior increases or decreases over time and what things, you know, how consequences influence behaviors and things like that. So yeah, a fascination with predicting behavior, honestly.
Okay.
And then I went to college and I got tools for it and then things like that.
Yeah.
Started working in it.
Yeah.
That's pretty fascinating.
Kind of a selfless profession.
Yeah, maybe.
Unless you enjoy it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you can still enjoy selfless professions and still be selfless.
Yeah.
I would say I notice I work with a lot of selfless people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I'm secretly not, but the people I'm around, they are.
I don't know.
I don't get them.
It seems like I'm a little less selfless than a lot of my coworkers and peers, to be honest. But
which is okay.
But I do think I've worked alongside a lot of warriors and really good, empathetic, sympathetic people.
Yeah.
People who will, you know, make their lives worse to try to make other people's lives better.
Are there a lot of younger people like yourself in this career? Is there a varying degree of different ages?
Yeah, I would say, to be honest, I don't know that well, but
yeah.
I would say the general demographic is between 20 and 30 and more female than male.
Mm-hmm. What's the difference between, so you got your master's degree.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that helped be more knowledgeable about what you do, the tool sets that you use, and things like that. Mm-hmm. So, is that something you'd recommend for somebody who wanting to get into this type of career? Is like get your master's degree and do what you do, or are you like maybe you could do it without the master's degree and kind of learn on the job or learn from your peers?
I think it's more the latter.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think if I had to give advice to someone who's going to go through a similar path, I would say you could probably go more the latter. You don't need like a master's degree in social work. I got that more for me because I was interested also in the time of counseling, therapy, mental health.
What does a master's in social work entail? What are you studying? Or
doing? How to make life easier and better for people. That's almost it at its most like philosophical core. Mm-hmm. So whether you do work that's more clinical, like counseling, therapy, or you work with nonprofits to help give people more resources or to help change laws, to help, accommodate more people, things like that. So, but there's degrees in behavior science now. So if you're going to work with people with developmental disabilities, and if you want to do behavior science, you totally don't need to go spend 4 years and the loans required to get your master's in social work.
Yeah.
You can totally just go into behavior science fields and you can be way more fast tracked.
Did they offer that when you were getting yours done?
Yes, but I wasn't really interested in my early 20s, to be honest. Back then, I should say I was more interested in counseling, therapy, dialoguing
Mm-hmm.
And what's cool is now I've like walked away from that, where now I'm working in behavior science fields, but I feel like I have some good dialoguing skills to help bond with parents and or to help even articulate with. That's why I kind of like older kids and kids that I can be like wittier with, because I can kind of use more of my like dialoguing skills that I learned when I was getting my master's degree.
I'm sure you can relate to them better, probably. Like you're right. So right now you're working with younger kids than you were before.
Yep.
And you prefer older kids. Why is that?
Well, I like the idea that even if you have someone that maybe their future, just being realistic and being honest, and these are important conversations to have with families with someone who has a developmental disability. What's the future going to look like? What is going to be like a great life for this person as they get older? What's a life that's going to be even a little better than it is now? And so I think baking in those, not just like compliance and like listening skills and like following instructions that you kind of teach with younger learners about like how do you be successful in schools and stuff and not get in trouble with police and whatever. But, you know, the independent living skills, or like, you know, if you have someone, you say in your family you have someone with a developmental disability, maybe they won't be able to live by themselves. But if they're going to live with their folks, them being able to contribute significantly to the family system sometimes makes the biggest difference. You know what I mean? Like, we have, I'll just use the name Matt because it's my own name. You know, Matt lives on the back property. Matt helps us with these couple of things, but we also help. You know, he has a job that he goes to every day, but we pay the lion's share of the bills. We help him with basically the things that are out of his ability. You know?
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I like about working with kids as they get older, to kind of settle into what's the life that they're going to like, you know?
Do you find that a lot of the kids or people you work with or treat, do you find that they come from wealthier parents? Is that something that's kind of exclusive to, or are there programs that can help families that are less fortunate, or stipends to get the help that you guys provide?
Yeah, so there's definitely the latter. I mean, resources are definitely huge for those families. I've found, I don't know, so I've only worked in Denver and now Northern California. So I only know those two like cultural areas, so to speak. But at both locations I was working at, we had like affluent, higher socioeconomic status families and lower socioeconomic status families.
Yeah.
In both locations. So
there's a little bit of mix.
So far, at least in my experience.
Do you see any difference in the relationship between the kids or the young adults and their families in those different demographics?
Yeah. So, there are some kids that, you know, maybe they're in high socioeconomic status families, but maybe their parents are working all the time, you know, compared to maybe there's a kid where their family doesn't have much resources, but their parents are around their house all the time. You know, just being in physical proximity to someone is going to make the nature of your relationship way different from them with them and things like that.
Do you find that some of those families rely more on what you guys provide rather than like them giving more effort to helping?
I think it's
like a crutch, maybe.
Well, do you offer advice to the families to say also do this at home?
Yeah,
you do.
Yeah, so that's a whole part of the package that we do. Even if we only work with a kid at school, we need to be able to translate in what we call like generalizing their behaviors to different settings, right? So we can't just have a kid that's always melting down at home, but then they're great out in the community and they're great at school. Like that's still major problems for the family, you know, or any variation of that. So generalizing behaviors across settings is a big deal. But also providing more resources to those families, you know, is a big thing that we do.
That's got to be very scary to be the parent and not know anything about how to give the best treatment to these kids. Like if I ended up having a kid and he had these disabilities, like I wouldn't know the first thing of how to make his life better or give him the tools he needs to help himself or
what to do.
Yeah, what to do. It's
and
like,
how could you be expected to know?
Even just being a parent in general is scary enough in that same ideology, right?
Especially if you didn't grow up in a family with a lot of kids, or you don't have a lot of friends who have kids, and you're like, is this how a kid is supposed to be? Or is there something wrong? Is it me? What do I do?
Yeah. It's a good point in that there's serious anxiety around that too, because those families will come to us and be like, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know where to start. I work in software, or I'm a nurse.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about behavior science. So a lot of it is teaching the families how behavior science works, what our plan is, why they should trust in the plan, how they need to help us by keeping interventions going and approaching them the same way at home when we're not there, continually over decades of.
You ever go into their homes and study how they're at home as well, if they have that type of issue?
Yeah. So we do services at home. We do services at clinic. We do services at even public places. Maybe we'll have social groups. It's COVID, right? No kids are being socialized, right? Or very few kids are being like regularly socialized right now, even if you're neurologically typical. So you can only imagine how much our guys really need like peer interaction.
Yeah.
Or even practice with peer interaction, right?
Yeah. It's crazy.
What do you? So you could guess or give an educated response to how do you think kids that are growing up during the pandemic, how that's going to affect like being social or interacting with people in general, like, and what do you think we could do to kind of fix the damage that's been done?
Well, what's weird about that also is I don't know how life is going to be different going forward than what it was before the pandemic hit as well. We're talking with like our significant others about like, are you now working from home more? So society is going to be changing a lot. Yes. So it's kind of hard to say. I really wish at this point in my life, I was like a 50-year-old or like a 60-year-old with enough like life knowledge to be like, oh, this is what this next generation is going to be like.
Yeah.
I so wish I could at least make a guess and then check back in 10 years to be like, I was right.
Yeah. We could all put bets on it. That'd be such a bad thing to do. But,
But at the minimum, a lot of young people right now just don't have the same reps with social interactions that we had growing up, for example.
Yeah.
Just repetitions of like, oh, I should say that differently next time and it'll go way better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Checking yourself. Like you're in the shower and you're like, fuck, I shouldn't have said that way.
Exactly. Yes. When your regrets come flooding back to you.
You're laying in bed and you're like, damn it.
It's partially also a generation of kids who are growing up with social media. So social media in school. Like when we were growing up is kind of starting to get into it, but we still mostly had like, we'll hang out with you after school and like maybe I'll text you if I have a phone or something, or call you. But now it's like, I think there's already going to be some problems from having so much social media in our lives. And then on top of that, now just this. So now there's kids who are communicating just over the video camera, just over the phone, text, Facebook. That's it. So it's going to be kind of a strange social situation. I mean, I know I work from home and I've been doing it for like
and you're weird as fuck.
4 or 5 years. No, but I think that when I do go, like there are some times where I'll be home for, I'm not going to lie, I will be home for an entire week. Like and
you never left?
Because I also live in an apartment building. So if I have to take the trash out or check the mail, it's all in the same place.
Yeah.
If I'm going to go to the gym, same place. There's usually not that many people going to the home gyms, right? Or the apartment gyms. So I'll be home for a week and then I'll step outside and I'll be like, this is what people are like.
Wow.
It's kind of, I don't really.
So you're your own little experiment right now.
I am.
Yeah. I can tell you folks it's not going well. He needs help.
I am the way I am. No, but I mean, I was an experiment. There's other people like that too, but now it's like so many people are like that.
I think you could also look at the inverse like effect that could have on kids. Like you always see the Catholic girl syndrome of like a very conservative Catholic girl that goes to college, introduced to alcohol. She just goes crazy. I mean, that partially happened to me. I was a young Catholic girl, and I went to college, and I was like, oh wow, this is crazy. I had all these freedoms, and you were kind of like, a lot of people are. They're either protected by their family or their parents too much, and they're not allowed to do certain things. So when they do have the ability to do it, they go buck wild. I mean, this is nothing new to people. People widely understand this, but when applied the same thought or notion to COVID kids, I wonder if it'll be the same way. I'm able to go out in public without a mask. Like, this is crazy. They go wild and crazy. I don't know.
That's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah, that's true. You already do it. Miles is a mask denier, actually. No. So, no, I'm kidding.
I wear my mask everywhere.
Yeah, he does. He's good. He wears 5.
Well, you know what's funny is we talk it so much about like how like if you don't have so much practice with basically being social, your skills are gonna wear off, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like even
is that true?
It's like sharpening your tool. It becomes dull over time if you don't practice enough.
Like you don't know that you need to address someone by looking in their eyes or like facing toward them, right? Or because like also, waiting to reciprocate.
Yeah. Also, a lot of times, like in my case, I don't use I use Zoom, but I don't use the video conferencing part of it.
He's shy.
Just audio.
Yeah, he doesn't want to put makeup on.
It's because I'm naked. Yeah. That's why.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I could totally see that. Now, like, I can talk to people, but yeah, then it's the mannerisms when I'm around them and saying like.
Well, we were talking like yesterday where we were talking about if you own a gun, you should be going to the gun range on a regular basis to practice your skills. And if you're not doing that, you're not like really being a responsible gun owner.
Right.
Because you do have to regularly practice that skill to make sure when needed, you can handle the gun responsibly.
Absolutely.
So it's if we're not out in public socializing or interacting with people on a regular basis and honing in our people skills, it starts to take a little bit of a dive. You start to get a little schmeagly.
Yeah, exactly. Like if Ariel works on a weekend, I'll just say her name. If she just works on a weekend and I have 2 days straight, and I'm just watching Always Sunny in Philadelphia for 2 days straight, my first conversation that I have with someone after those 2 days is going to be really whack. Yeah. I'm going to botch that conversation.
What character do you start to become?
Oh, I'll come out immediately as Dennis.
You just the implication. It's the implication.
The golden god himself will come out and be like, ooh.
The golden god. I love that.
All right, my next interaction is going to be better than that one.
Yeah. Like, I'm so sorry.
I think I made that weird.
I'm so sorry. This came off way too golden gaudy.
That's great.
So you did the behavioral science, working with autistic kids, young adults for a little while, and then what happened next?
Then I accepted a job in esports, which is pro gaming, to be a coach for an esports team, which all that was happening in LA. So I picked up everything, moved to LA, asked for Ariel to forgive me, and then also move out there where she has family. So that was nice.
Yeah. Well, you guys always figured because you moved out to Denver for school, and then I think your plan, correct me if I'm wrong, was to eventually find your way back closer to family, right?
Yeah, we heard babysitters was the tech. That was the technique.
Yeah. Hey,
knowing where they're at and
use your resources wisely, as I say.
Yeah.
That's cool. So, kind of obviously a way different industry, but you're still using the same behavioral. So what was your official title working in esports?
Yeah, for me, I was a performance coach. So my responsibility was for what is the quality in which the team performs on match days when, there are stakes for money or standings or, championships or whatever it is. And a lot of how that's broken down is you can't expect a team in any sport to perform well if they're not practicing well too. So a lot of it comes down to like practice habits and things like that. So basically I was the coach and staff member that was responsible for what is the effort like, what is the execution like, what is the culture like at practice and on stage.
This is crazy. So every sport has this pretty much. Every major sport that's has a lot of money on it.
And in more, in the sports in sports industries that are just way more developed, you won't have a performance coach, but performance coaching will be ingrained into every single coach on the coaching staff. You know what I mean? And that's really what esports would and will do if they're still doing their thing when they have caught up to other sports leagues.
Yeah.
Because there's not a performance coach in the NBA
or
in the NFL, and sometimes that is happening, but typically not.
Well, in a lot of cases when you work with a bunch of professionals, and there's so many different egos, that becomes the head coach's job is managing those egos
and personalities.
Yeah,
you can even frame them as personalities to not drive them as crazy and talk about their egos as much.
Who's the coach that coached the Chicago Bulls during
Phil Jackson?
Phil
is
Jackson
famous for that.
He constantly
Good
talked
luck
about
with Dennis Rodman, man.
Yeah, he constantly talked about his large part of his job was managing egos.
Absolutely.
Because you had a bunch of these guys who were fucking amazing at what they did, and when that happens, they become egomaniacs.
And they got to where they are based on their own juice and based on their own success.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So they've had to lean into it to a degree.
Right. And that's intimidating.
And trust in it.
Yeah. If you're another team and you come in to play the Chicago Bulls with that team,
oh boy,
and with all these egos, like, it's intimidating. It's got to be.
Yeah, true.
And you can lean into that a little bit. So, what game were you coaching for right off the bat?
League of Legends.
League of Legends.
Yeah, which is a 5-on-5 game. So 5-on-5, one head coach, coaching staffs of maybe 2 to 5 coaches, I would say was average. Back then, I don't know what it is in the last year.
And the team was 5, or they had backups?
5 players.
Yeah,
5 players, no backups usually.
Wow,
which I was not a big fan of.
So if one person for one reason or another couldn't play, what happened? You had to forfeit.
Here's part of the problems. In physical sports, you're prepared for that.
Yeah, you have people on the
because
bench.
It's inevitable.
Yeah.
In a non-physical sport like esports, it's easy to convince yourself that there's no physical limitation or no physical
it's like when you work from
overexertion.
home.
Huh?
It's like when you work from home and you're sick.
Yeah.
And it's like,
yeah.
Well,
it's
you
like
can
harder
probably
to...
still work because like you don't have to come into work to get people sick.
Exactly.
And what do you just have a headache?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the problem is you don't want to have people that are ready to step in and play because one person is dropping out, next man up thing. But you want for everyone to earn their spot and to keep their spot and to compete every day at practice. You know what I mean?
Right.
And to keep a good attitude and to be a good teammate.
Yeah.
And if any of those things fall off, the way that every other sport works in the world is you just don't play as much.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't piss your coach off or he's not going to play you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not all those dynamics have really were as involved in esports.
Yep.
Do you think it's because of the money?
That's a factor.
How much they have to pay the players, so they just cut it as close as they can.
How much do they pay the players? On give us a range.
Sure, it's heavily bonused, right?
Well, and it depends on the status of the player too. You know, is this like a player that's going to be all pro? Like, are they among the best positions in the league, or are they among the bottom positions in the league?
Yeah.
I would say the average esports player that I worked with was probably making between 50 and 70 or 80K.
Okay.
To be an average player in the league.
Uh-huh.
The good players were making over 100K.
Yeah.
The very good players were making over a couple 100K.
Wow.
The great players were making over several 100K.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, unfortunately, what would happen is those bags would be thrown to those big time players.
Mm-hmm.
And then you wouldn't be able to afford to have 4 or 5 bench players.
Yep. Right.
Or money wouldn't be allocated that way.
Yeah.
And then you don't have depth to keep your starters continually earning their spot every day. And you say it like that, like it's a threat. But if you played sports growing up, it's not. It's like, don't have bad effort. or I'm going to take you out, Edwards.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I have that coach voice in the back of my head even now. Edwards, you know, it's like, that was terrible effort.
Yeah.
You deserve to be pulled out after that.
Yeah.
I was like, you're right.
What are the ethnicity makeup? It's heavily dominated by Korean, right? Korean players.
Yeah. For us, it was probably 40% Korean Americans, maybe, and then the rest was a mixture of white Caucasian, Asian, non-Korean. Those, I would say, white Caucasian, Asian, non-Korean would probably be the next,
Yeah.
the next biggest group.
And what kind of aging demographic are we working with?
12-year-olds?
Yeah, like I mean, like what's
What
the
ages?
age group? Yeah.
Yeah.
Typically.
Man, 17 to 22
Really?
young adults.
So once you hit
17
when
to
you
22.
aging out when you hit 23.
A lot of, well, that's actually a big debate
Okay.
in the industry. It's like, have their, do your finger skills fall off around 20
like,
or
because
so?
like in the NBA, you start
Right.
to hit like 32, 34, and you slimming down. You have to lose a lot of body mass, and now they're like hoping your shooting skills are still great.
Yeah.
But you're not the man you used to be, and then
Right.
you retire.
Right.
For physical reasons.
Mm-hmm.
In this sport, you gotta imagine. I mean, I'm always bewildered about these kids coming in and like, we'll play like dabble in Rocket League or Call of Duty, and we're getting pwned by like a 7-year-old or like a 12-year-old,
Yeah.
and he's just like whooping our ass, and I'm like, geez, the
He's
kids
probably
these
telling you
days,
about it, too.
they really know how to play these games.
Yeah.
So I gotta imagine once you hit a certain age, there's like a 17-year-old that comes in and he's like this is all he does. He plays this since he was like super little, and
He can still drink a lot of Red Bull because it doesn't affect his body. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Yeah. But then the other thing, and part of it is you're right about that these people will spend so long working on their craft, really,
Yeah.
to be respectful, working on their craft to get to where they are. But unfortunately, what's different in that process is it's not team oriented. When they are by themselves up until 17 years old, just constantly working on their craft solo. Well, you're not playing golf or swimming, bro. You're in a team sport.
Yeah.
You got to be able to communicate with people when you're annoyed and stressed.
And that was probably what you worked on the most during your time. Yeah.
It was catching up to the 10 years or 15 years of lack of team dynamics or even coaching dynamics or organized sports dynamics, where it's like, this is the way it works. And you kind of got to trust us.
Yeah.
But that's a hard adaptation for young people to make quickly.
Is League of Legends the dominating video game right now in the esports world?
It was.
Yeah.
But also back then, Fortnite was coming out, but Fortnite wasn't really doing esports stuff a whole lot yet. It's certainly not at the same level.
Yeah, they are
Number
now.
one. Are they now?
Yeah, are they? Is Fortnite now like
Actually
a
don't
big
know.
player? Okay.
Actually don't know.
So we should tell everybody, when you ended up retiring from esports,
Yeah.
you weren't like catching up on the weekends of how it's doing. You were like, I'm done.
I'm
like,
not tracking it anymore. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
I don't have any desire to track how the industry is doing. I have one friend in that industry. And
Yeah.
I'm interested in
So,
how he's doing.
Yeah, you could probably catch up with him and see how it's doing.
Yeah.
During your time there, did you see the league, not League of Legends, but the league esports like grow? Was it like a steady growth where because the big debate has been, this is the next thing, like pro sports is going to take a backseat to esports. It's what the newer generations are more focused on, like
kids are more kids are playing League than they are playing like Madden or something.
Yeah, and in general, which is another funny thing. Like, at what point will esports Madden video games overtake the popularity of the actual physical game? Mm-hmm. Right? Because is there an esports for Madden?
I'm sure there is. Yeah, there's even NBA ones. So,
like NBA 2K.
Yeah,
like
and
whatever.
what I think of esports is if you win, if you're playing at a certain level, and if you win, you get money.
Yeah.
If the answer is yes, then I feel like that's kind of esports.
Okay.
You know
That's
what
fair.
I mean?
That's true.
Whether you're in big leagues like I was in, or like a smaller,
Tournament,
smaller
yeah.
console games.
And with like streaming being as big as it's getting with like Twitch, like you don't have to have a single platform or like league to do something. You can just have like independent tournaments and different things with money, with people buying in to watch it or buying in to play it, and then people winning money at the end if you win. Like that makes the whole idea of esports decentralized, right? Like there is like the League of Legends pro teams, but there's also like these other like little tournaments that are happening, I'm sure.
Yeah, or just streamers who are making money off of advertisers.
Yeah.
Because you might have a guy who you were talking about is making like 100K because he's a pretty good player, but he could also go stream, and if he has a good personality, he could make millions.
So you know about that. That's a big thing.
Yeah.
And that's actually why we had a lot of players starting to look toward not playing professionally anymore as they get to their young 20s and mid 20s, because they start to look in two ways. One, could I make more money if I just stream, which is way easier, or at least more convenient.
Could they do both? Did they have to sign a disclosure saying they couldn't do any streaming on the side?
Sometimes.
Yeah,
sometimes.
Moonlighting.
I also think a lot of players misunderstand streaming for not understanding that it's a performance that you're putting on.
Yeah. And you like, and a lot of times you're playing a character, right? When you're playing.
Yeah. Because have you ever played video games and tried to talk to your friend at the same time and have a conversation?
It could be tough. You got to practice.
It's hard.
We do that sometimes with Rocket League, and we just end up losing ridiculously.
Yeah. And streamers have to practice having that vocal, like you have your brain connected to your mouth. Even esports players had to do that. The 17-year-old, okay, let's just be like totally mean for a second. The 17-year-old basement dweller that goes into esports. And I say it like that because I totally understand that.
And you saw that.
Yeah, totally. That's not being, I don't actually mean that like pejoratively in my heart about those people.
Right.
I can understand that being the path. That person's not used to having stream of consciousness talking while they're playing.
Oh, or the social
skills. And now they're in a team
skills.
sport where it's like, we're going to have a system breakdown if you don't communicate with me while we're playing, bro. And it's your responsibility. You know what I mean?
Or you're off the team.
I've actually told the story on this podcast about me going out to LA to hang out with you guys, and then going to that party at the I call it the frat house. It was almost like a frat house.
Yeah.
And a lot of your players were like in a dark room playing while everybody was hanging out, like having a good time.
Yeah, a lot of throwing social functions was giving the opportunity, but not enforcing.
Yeah. I mean, it is what it is, but sometimes that also makes for a really good player too. Like
we also enforced some social opportunities too.
We're
going to the movies. You're coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
The shuttle's gonna be there in 10 minutes.
For ice cream. You have to get Rocky Road or you're off the team.
Should have brought them to strip clubs.
There you go. Wow.
Yeah.
No, that's funny.
Yeah. But if you don't mind, I also want to say something too about early 20s, why players stop and why they stop playing. Part of it is they start looking at that. Part of it is also, I think a lot of these people look in their early 20s and they look around at what their family members are doing, what their friends are doing that aren't in esports, and they think, my God, I'm missing so much. I'm only playing this game and going to sleep and eating all the time compared to my friends that are getting these awesome, dope houses and that are getting married and are traveling
to places
college, like the Pacific Northwest.
Fun.
Yeah. Or getting dogs or things like that. And unfortunately, a lot of those things are hard to sustain in esports for players.
These guys, how much did they play? Like on average every day? How much do you think these guys were playing?
I knew people. I've known people in my past who would play all the time, and they're just casual players, like what I would consider a casual player.
Right.
But they play all the time.
Yeah. So to give you an idea, we would practice 80 hours a week. Then we would also have our players do effectively homework where they're just playing by themselves, training after hours, working on something specific, usually is the ideal way. You'd be like, hey, check this thing out, test this and see how it goes, and do it for 4 more hours. So an 80-hour work week.
Dude, that's 16 hours a day, Monday through Friday. Holy shit.
And a lot of that paradigm is something that I didn't feel like it was good. And I would try to have my teams do different things from that because I didn't feel like it was great.
It wasn't healthy. Were you guys worried?
Or really maximally effective.
Were you guys worried about blood clots, like sitting down for too long? Like, did you enforce like some kind of routine of exercise, or at least just walk around like a little bit, like a 15-minute break?
Yeah, you might do things like, maybe core classes where you just work on core and hips and back.
Yeah.
Because those are the more functional esports muscles.
Yes.
Reminds me of the episode of South Park with the VR one where Cartman's just on like sitting there and he's like all disgusting and has all these warts and stuff, and he's sitting there in his VR universe.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, not that they're like that. I'm not trying to say those guys are like that, but
yeah. But you think about what are the stressors on the body if you're an esports person. If someone has back issues, that's going to get worse and worse and worse. And humans aren't supposed to sit down. Like you'll talk to, like my brother's a programmer, and they have you talk to someone who's in computer science, and I'm sure you know about this. Like hips and back and core are super targeted in those fields, because when you start to have back problems, it gets worse and worse and worse for you. Mm-hmm. Some of the things with esports and gaming.
Yeah, I could imagine there's similar risks.
It's fascinating to me to go back to like the whole idea of kids doing like what would be like freelancing, which is like streaming on the side. Mm-hmm. Like that's something that you couldn't do if you were an NBA player. You couldn't do like, you can't just be like, I'm gonna go play basketball
and have people watch.
Yeah. Like it's like that's what makes it so interesting to me, is the decentralization of the sport, where like anybody can get involved. And you don't have to be like, you have to be good, obviously, or you have to be charismatic, play a character really well for the streaming thing. But you don't have to go to college, play the sport, then do the Columbine, and then get drafted and, do this whole thing. And,
for now,
I was, when I played football in high school, and I was surrounded by guys who were interested in doing this long term, talking with recruiters, going to college, and they would always talk about like the percentage of guys that play college football who actually get drafted is so small that it's like winning. It's like you could win the lottery, and you probably would have a better chance winning the lottery than getting drafted in the NFL. Mm-hmm. But with esports, it's the entry, the amount of effort to get it into the entry of it is so much scaled back. I think like you just have to play it, you just have to be good on camera, and I mean I'm of course generalizing and making it sound easy. I couldn't do it. I mean I do this and but I find it hard enough.
But it's kind of like other things, like if you were a YouTuber or something, where it's not like you said, that whole long process of like you have to do this to get started. You can just get started, and then that opens up the door to so many other people who may have been good content creators or players or whatever, and now they can easily harness that skill because it's right there in front of them.
I remember when Vine, that was a big thing. Mm-hmm. I remember when Vine crashed and like they discontinued the app. I remember a lot of those content creators that I followed, what they did was either they started doing like sketch stuff on YouTube, or they went into video game streaming. A lot of them did the video game streaming thing because they weren't necessarily good at the game that they were playing, but they were really good on camera because they were doing the Vine videos and collaborating with people and playing characters, and they're very goofy, and that translated very well to streaming video games and playing video games. And so like again, going back to like the small barrier of entry for the industry is like you don't have to be good at the video game, or you could be good at the video game and not be as good on camera. Like there's so many different people who fit that mold, and that just makes it more exciting. Like I have a couple of friends who are like, I want to eventually do that, or I want to, I do that on the side, or I'm not very popular, but it's like something, and you have fun doing it too. Like
it's a hobby.
It's a hobby, that you can make money off of eventually.
Yeah, maybe.
And that's the hope for a lot of people, that you do it at first and it's fun, and then you might be able to monetize more and more and more. Mm-hmm. And you might even be one of those people that hits that point that it's like, I can monetize this enough that I can quit my job.
Right.
And that's really wild.
I know. I was wondering about with streaming, it seems, at least from what I've seen, to be actually like a decent female presence. But how is that in esports? Is that similar, or is it more male dominated?
To stream as a female in esports?
No, like in the esports
in the leagues,
teams.
on the teams.
Were there any females on the teams
like
you coached?
players.
Yeah.
We didn't have any. And it didn't feel like there was a great reason why.
It kind of reminds me of like why there's not a lot of females in computer programming. Probably, right? It's just not something they're interested in. Or
if you think about it, and I follow the NBA a lot, there are now some fresh new NBA coaches that are women.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And even that's kind of new.
Yeah, we talked about that. There's a female NFL coach.
49ers.
Referee?
There is a female referee, but there's also a coach for the 49ers, I think. Assistant coach. She's female. I think she was like one of the first.
We saw during the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Watching the Super Bowl. I think it was the ref, right?
It was the ref.
And I was like, what? Never seen that before.
I can tell you those women are probably badasses, and they probably have excellent communication skills.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because they've got to be able to make it work with all of these prickly,
a male-dominated
prickly
industry.
Males.
Yeah.
That you have to speak to them differently. You have to think about this word choice compared to that.
Yes.
Yeah, they're probably great communicators.
Absolutely.
Honestly.
I could see that for sure. So you did League of Legends, and then you did another sport. Was it Overwatch?
Yeah, and then I did Overwatch.
Which when you told me that, I was like, Overwatch? I was like, that's a thing?
What is
like
that?
I know the video game, and I know like people liked it, but it wasn't, since I wasn't playing it and it wasn't something I was into, or none of my friends were into it, I didn't think it was that big of a thing to actually have an esports team for.
Yeah, which is wild because the teams were basically a lot of how Blizzard said it. Blizzard is a company that put it on, the game company that made Warcraft and World of Warcraft and StarCrafts and things like that. They ran their league by basically finding traditional sports people and having them set up franchises.
Okay.
So like Robert Kraft from the Patriots had like a Boston franchise. So I worked for the LA franchise, which the Pockets were basically like the LA Rams.
Okay.
And like the Denver Nuggets family.
So the game companies actually are the ones who pushed it, right?
They made those relationships.
Yeah, basically they needed to have, what was it, 20 million to buy in for a spot in the league?
Wow.
I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
I think it was 20 million to buy in, and I think there was, oh boy, I'm going to be in trouble for not knowing this. There was at least 20 teams.
Do you think those teams are profitable?
I know that most of them are not.
Gotcha.
And I know a lot of them are operating because the people who are running them just love the daily feel.
Yes.
Honestly.
Yes.
Or they're maybe barely making it work, but they love the daily feel.
Yeah. It's cool. It's a cool thing to have too, I imagine. It's like a clout thing. Like, yeah, I've got an esports team.
Yeah.
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 That's why in my opinion, there's a lot of these great restaurants that have like these really over the top restaurants. Like at the end of the day, they don't make money, but they're started by guys who have a lot of money, and they think it's cool to have their own restaurant. Like, oh yeah, let me take you to my restaurant. Like, oh, you have a restaurant. Like, oh yeah, let me show you my esports team. I have a fucking esports team.
Yeah, it's like having a ginormous house. It's
Yeah.
like you and your wife, and maybe you have a kid or something, and then you have a 15,000 square foot house.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, look at my
3
house.
pools.
Yeah.
I only use one of the pools.
Yeah.
So my perspective now in hindsight, looking at esports, like we were talking about like lack of depth with like teams paying players to be bench basically, right?
Yep.
Or to be backups.
Yep.
And it's easy to be like, oh, this is annoying. How come they don't do that? But if you think from the perspective of business owners, it's like, I'm not making money on this. I literally can't give any more money to provide depth. A lot of it becomes, how do you what's your strategy for, the
Was
type of
that
rosters
a
you're building?
contributing factor to you leaving the sport?
So there were some things like that was like, situation A feels really terrible, but I understand why it's happening, and I don't think it's going to change very much in the next couple of years. And if I ask Ariel to wait any longer while this changes, I'm going to lose out on the more important thing in my life.
Yeah.
I'm out.
Some people are very passionate about it and probably will stick with it and find longevity into it and have to deal with all the bullshit in between as the sport grows. And it seemed like from your perspective that you were like, maybe would you consider going back to the industry once it has evolved and grown and budgets become bigger, teams become more profitable, or were you like, I had fun?
I feel more like that. My wife well enough to know that she's really smart and is very independent and is really strongly opinionated. I would need for her to think it's a good idea for me to be interested even slightly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I need it's not like, it couldn't be something that I'd have to be like, hey, think about this, or maybe check this out. She'd have to approach me with it for me to be interested even slightly.
I see. You did some traveling, some cool traveling.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Where'd you go?
By the way, I haven't said this. I'm really appreciative and thankful for all my experiences in esports. Mm-hmm. I really have. Like the people I met and the ridiculous players that I worked with, like ridiculously good players that I worked with. I worked with good coaches and good teams.
Can I just say that I thought you were fucking crazy when I first met you, you were interested in this thing and you were working with like clubs or something. You were doing a couple different things. And then you were like, yeah, I'm trying to do this thing where I'm going to apply what I learned here and move it into the esports scene. And I remember being like super supportive of your idea. I was like, you should control your own destiny.
You were one of my day ones in that way. That's true.
Yeah. And I was like, and then when you were like, yeah, I got a couple interviews, and then you're like, dude, I got the job. I was like, holy fuck.
This is happening.
I can't believe you did that.
I remember feeling the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was super proud of you, man. And I was really sad because that meant you had to move to LA. But I was like, I was content with it because I knew that you worked so hard to make it happen for yourself. Like that, there was nobody opening doors for you, or there weren't any doors when you approached it to be open.
I had to pitch what I wanted them to pay me to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Really?
And then to create my own job description and then kind of my own approach to the job and be like, hey, like I can help you guys add value in these ways, as opposed to them being like, hey, we're hiring this. I hope you meet the qualifications. It was, hey, please hire me as this. Here are my qualifications. Here's what my plan is going to be.
Yeah.
And that sounds cool and that's like exciting at first, but I needed more structure than that long term.
Yes.
I need and want things like supervisors and job descriptions.
Yes, because
staff meetings.
Well, I think it also it was a very risky move for you to do that, because now when they do say like yes, then you got to be like, oh fuck, like now I gotta do it, like, and you have to like prove yourself every year that you're worth what they're giving you.
Yeah.
And without any like guardrails or bumpers.
Yeah.
Which is like supervisors giving you direction, mentors in the field, or like you said, just the bare minimum, which is like a job description of like what you're like. You didn't have any of that. You were like controlling that whole thing, which is like incredibly, I would assume, like scary, because
if the team doesn't do better next year, then you were worthless to them.
Yeah, you were constantly having to check yourself.
You're right.
Yeah, which is like, I can imagine is pretty frustrating at times.
Yeah.
Did that bother? That obviously had to bother you a little bit, right?
Yeah, it kind of stripped microscopic layers away every year, or so, and then it's just like eventually you lose enough layers to where it's like, oh, we're doing this again next year, but it's, are we ready to do this one more year?
Do you think it worked? What you were doing with the guys?
Yeah, I noticed a difference.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed a big difference. A lot of it was just like, do I make a good influence, right? Even in 1% for one player. So there would be certain players that I would work with a lot, and I would need to be a big influence. And there would be some players that if I could positively influence them 5%, that was huge. You know what I mean? In specific ways, because different players need different things.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. Especially some of the players I worked with. I worked with Hall of Famers. You know what I mean?
That's awesome.
At least some.
Yeah.
I worked with some like fresh, new, wet behind the ear, super young players. But I worked with some like Hall of Famers that like are going to be remembered in like Generation 1 esports down the road. If if and as esports survives, they're going to look back on that generation and be like, wow, I remember these guys. imagine if they had more help and more support from their coaching staffs. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
did you have peers that you could talk to about issues you were having or things that you had questions about? Or
yes. Okay, and this is where I have to admit that I'm weird and different. The problem is I don't want to be friends with anyone that I'm competing with. I don't even want to be friendly with someone that I'm competing with.
So the whole saying, keep your friends close but your enemies closer. It is not like gel with your strategy.
I wouldn't be down, because the thing is, there were opportunities for me to do that. And maybe in hindsight, if my goal was to make esports work and to stay in esports and everything else was peripheral, maybe I should have done more of that. Of connecting with my peers and being like, man, how do you handle this thing? Or like, I've got this challenge at work right now. What do you do about that? But I didn't want to do any of those things because I also didn't want to show my hand to my competitors that worked for other teams. And I wasn't interested in even being friends. I liked it better when I could villainize those people. I was the psycho that would, on my work, and I did this when I was a player too, in my work area.
Chad is a child molester?
What?
Like that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Planting seeds like, the other team, they low key like are into child porn.
Well, and what's funny is I actually think that this happens in sports. You hear about like famous people who have fabricated stories about like, oh, this guy once slighted me when I was a kid and asked for an autograph.
Yeah.
And I remember that for 20 years. And then they'll ask like, Shaq, did that happen? He's like, no, I made it up. Right? And so I think I learned at a younger age that if I villainize people, I prepare to compete against and play against them harder. If I don't like even 1% of you. If I like 1 or 5% or 20% of you, I might not be as cutthroat when I need to, or work as hard.
Did you take a little bit of that from MJ's playbook a little bit?
I think some of that was, I think some of that.
Super competitiveness.
So like for me, I was a psycho, like my players would even like laugh and make fun of me for this, but I would print out the faces of opposing coaches and I would put them on my wall the whole week before we would play them, because I'd look at their damn faces and I'd be like, imagine what this guy's doing to prepare to play against us. That son of a bitch, I need to do a little bit more, you know?
Yeah. You would start to fabricate stories in your head about what these people are doing.
They don't even respect what we're doing over here.
Yeah,
and
fuck them, dude.
Yeah. And then it's like, okay, I'll do 2 more hours today. You know what I mean?
So let's talk about that. What was your work schedule like? How many hours a week were you working?
Rough and not fair to Ariel.
Yeah.
For me, I'm like so for an airport person, if I'm flying, I'm there 2 hours before my flight.
Yeah, me too.
Even if you only need 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Even if most people only need 90, I need an hour 20 so I can enjoy the experience and know that nothing's going to go wrong. I approach sports the same way when I was a player and when I was a coach. So for me, it was like, the worst thing is if we lose and if I look myself in the mirror and I think of what I could have done. So long as I have that clean heart, by the time that we play and we're competing, I could accept any outcome. I could get my ass kicked.
Helps you sleep at night.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I could live with myself. So I was a preparer. So for me, in order to feel like I've done my absolute best and there's no way I could have done it any differently and I've got to just live with this, if we lost, we got killed sometimes, we got embarrassed sometimes, it happens. You take your licks before you learn how to win. I would start my day super early. So I would get to the practice area 2 hours before players, maybe even sometimes 3 hours, to make sure that meetings and stuff were ready. Normal things, right? If you talk to anyone, that's not even giving myself a whole lot of credit. You talk to anyone who works in any type of semi or pro sports, it's almost like school. Before the kids come in, you got to have all your lessons and stuff ready. You got to know what your plan is. You got to have your materials good. So there's no dead time, right? Because like a good practice is constant. There's no waiting around on the practice field or, in the house or in the facility or wherever we were. So I needed a couple hours before players got there. And then I would usually like maybe an hour or so after players left. And that's more normal in NBA and in the NFL and stuff like that. So unfortunately, my days would start at more like 4.
Jesus fuck.
Practice would start more around like 9-ish. Practice would go from 9-ish till maybe 8-ish.
and I'd be back at home at 9
at night.
And yeah,
Oh
and
my
that
God.
that would be in season, and I would have 3 months off.
Okay, so
You know
like
what I mean?
Like almost like a teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Makes
it's
sense,
easier
but it's
doing-
not worth it.
so it's a lot of hours.
Yeah.
But you're not doing it 12 months a year. You're doing that 8 months or so. But that's still a lot.
time.
That's a lot, man. If
You
you,
know.
think about like what teachers do, I mean, they're not working that amount of hours, and they get like 3 months off.
But they're also not competing for as much glory and money. And
That's true. There's much more on the line.
Yeah.
than shaping
You know.
the minds of our youth.
You know, if your team does, even if you're super selfish, and if your team does well, and everyone kind of thinks about what your bonus might be, right?
Yeah.
If your like team does well, you'd be like, oh, I could chip in and get this bag for Ariel or something, or I could be like, oh, maybe I could buy this thing.
So your compensation was also had some bonus structure to it.
Yeah, usually.
Yeah.
And why wouldn't you do that, right?
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
And I would do
Makes
that for
sense.
player contracts too.
Yeah.
Why not?
Makes you work harder.
Yeah.
They should do that to teachers too. I think we've talked about that before.
That would be awesome.
Did
But
they?
there's some like
Assessment is hard.
there's
with that,
some
Yeah.
there's some like gray lines that work out there
A
though.
lot of gray lines,
Yeah.
especially if you work at a school that's like I forget what they call them, where they have a lot of immigrants and stuff or non-English speakers.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or lower income areas
Yeah.
probably have less family support
Right.
because they're working out long hour jobs, and you know the kids maybe are more
Yeah.
there's a
and you
there's
have different kids every year.
yeah
It's not
exactly
like a team or
that
like-
you recruit and
Yeah.
pay to be there. If you're paying
Really?
kids
Well,
to be at
that-
school, they would
that's-
learn a lot more.
That's the other thing too, is like I mean I have coworkers and stuff, and because of my own respective time, I would never try to ask them to like stay later or start earlier to work on something with me or whatever, because I have people who work in different time zones, and I'm always like, hey, it's 5 o'clock their time or whatever their work hours are. I'm like, hey, if you need to go, just go, and it's their choice if they want to keep talking to me or not. But you would be more incentivized to keep the players to keep practicing, right? Like, was their contract like you have to work 80 hours a week of practicing?
No, but there's kind of
Expectation.
team expectations.
There's the
as well.
expectation, yeah. So
Yeah.
did you ever have things where like guys just didn't want to
Yeah.
play?
And unfortunately, that is part of the things that esports needs to continue to get better about, just culturally being like, hey, this isn't a gaming house anymore. That's like some 2012 shit. This is 2020.
Mm-hmm.
You are in a gaming facility. This
Yeah.
is your work. You punch in, you punch out. You come in as early as you need. You know, like the best players in any sport, they got to work earlier than they needed to because they wanted to and they saw the benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And they knew that the other great players on other teams were doing that. So if you weren't doing that, they're going to just outpace you
Yeah.
and things like that. So a lot of it is kind of like self-guided, but you need to set up cultural things for, okay, why not just call it practice and say we have individual training for 3 hours? You know what I
Right.
mean? If you really need everyone there, you could just own up to it and call it mandatory.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And that's kind of a
And you have
difference
to
that
pay them for it, right? Don't you have to pay overtime or something? I'm sure that in
Well, the salary,
especially in California, there's got to be labor laws against.
Yeah, I was
getting
gonna.
people
That was
to
one of
work.
my next
Actually-
question was:
I
is
actually
there
don't
like
know
a
much about
union that players can join?
yes, there's
Yeah.
a player union, but you can only imagine it's not as well ran as like an NBA player union.
Yeah.
Right.
Where those guys are like, look, I'm
That's tight,
40.
yeah.
I want to look out for this next generation. That's not happening.
Yeah.
It's like a 25-year-old looking out for 23-year-olds.
And you guys
Not really the
had
same thing.
players who were 17, right? They weren't even adults.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is that change? Like, did you have HR around? Was there like any
We
of
should have.
those?
We should have.
Yeah.
We should have, but didn't. So a lot of it's just like they're like little mini businesses.
Yeah.
And when you're a mini business, it means that you don't have all the details fleshed out like you need to not have issues.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You talk to your HR when you have human issues that you need help resolving,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Esports teams would totally benefit from things like HRs. And a lot of my job was doing HR things.
I'm sure, yeah. Yeah.
A lot of
Well,
it.
because like when you are operating in such a small capacity or like a small business type environment,
So many hats.
you do, yeah, you wear all that. And a lot of that like I can relate to like a lot of like the restaurant industry is kind of in the same way. Like if you open your restaurant, say you're like a successful chef and you were working at a restaurant that you didn't own, but now you've honed in skills and you've saved a little money. You want to open up your little ramen shop or whatever. Quite often what you would find and see is like not only did you build the menu, but you're also responsible for fixing the stove when it goes out or fixing the walk-in cooler. Like you're the chef, you're the maintenance guy, you're like somewhat of the HR guy, and you run the numbers too. Like
Yeah.
so like
Because your margins are tight. You can't just hire someone to
exactly.
do all that.
Unless you're doing a multi-unit operation, that's when you start to see a little bit more inflow of money to allocate to different positions to help you run the business more efficiently.
Have more structured roles, defined roles. That way, if this part of the business isn't going well, you have a person and a place you can go to and say, yo, we got to performance this. You know what I mean? As opposed to, so I'm just doing my best. I'm really overwhelmed, which everyone can identify with right now with COVID. I feel like everyone's being pulled in any job that you work in. Everyone's being pulled in so many more ways than they were 2 years ago.
Yeah, especially if your company laid off a bunch of people and then the work was still there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Speaking of which, how do you think COVID affected that industry of esports?
God, I'd love to know from the inside, but I don't.
Yeah, right.
Because
Right.
what's weird is we've looked at things like the rates of like, okay, everyone's at home, people are probably watching more sports, right? It's not true. Even traditional physical sports. People are doing things like going on hikes more, like incorporating their coping skills into what they're doing for fun more, maybe working on their house more.
Right. They're compensating in other areas that were untraditional to pre-COVID.
Or they would normally sit on the couch, but now people are spending so much time at home, I think they're more sensitized to doing nothing on the couch.
Yes.
To where it's like, I'm going to be more productive with my time. You know what I mean? So you would expect for NBA ratings to be up, NFL ratings to be up, esports ratings to be up, and they're not.
Yeah.
People aren't watching as much. Now, if you watch the product for like physical sports, you'll be like, well, there's no one in the stands. There's no lights. There's no sounds. That's not as cool. That stuff obviously makes sense. But with esports, I have the same curiosities. I wonder.
I think the whole environment of being able to go to a baseball game or being able to go to a basketball or football game, I think that bred the interest to keep watching when your team wasn't playing at home. Like
Yeah, it's got to.
it keeps in the interest. Like you go to a Broncos game, for instance, and you have such a great time, and you kind of hold on to that like feeling. It creates like anytime I see now the Broncos logo, I remember how much of a good time I had at the Broncos game, and the Broncos are playing on Saturday. I'll put the game on. Like, but since people have been so disconnected from that experience, because like and that in general is what people are more interested in nowadays, is like the experience piece of things, and it's so much different from being able to like watch it on your couch from actually being at the 50-yard line watching the game, and hearing the rumble of the crowd and the smells and the sounds, and we'll start to lose a little bit of that, right?
Well, the thing is, you're spending $100 to $500 on a ticket.
Yeah.
You and your buddies, your family, whoever. You're all like, yeah, we bought the tickets, we have the passes, whatever. We're going, like we're gonna go do this thing. Versus like, yeah, it's on TV and like I might watch it because it's on there, but there's really no commitment for you to watch it.
That's like the idea behind branding something in general, is like when you start to put a value on it, or like a high value on it, it becomes more desirable, right? Like the difference between the material used in a Gucci bag versus like a bag that you would find that somebody would make on Etsy or something may be quite similar, but the fact that it has this mark on it that says Gucci, and you know there's the clout behind it, and Justin Bieber's wife is wearing one, like it becomes more desirable.
Right.
I think like sports kind of operate in similar manner. Maybe you could see like pull parallels from that.
Yeah, sure.
And so when you start to lose the face value of it, like, oh, it's free on television. Oh, like, well, I'll just catch the next one. I'm not really losing out on anything or gaining anything by not watching it.
Yeah. I mean, like you see sports teams move around.
Yeah.
So, because like with some sports, especially college, there's some kind of relationship with the team.
Yeah.
Where you're like, I lived in that area, or I really liked a player who played on that team for a long time, whatever. But then it's kind of just like, well, that's the local football team, or that's the local soccer team, whatever. I just go to their games just for fun. But if I can't go to the game, then I don't really care that much about it.
And you would see, I think you saw, or people would see in the industry within the last decade of the decline of viewership, but the college sports were declining at such a smaller rate than pro sports are. I think because of that, like more people are getting college degrees, more people are being almost indoctrinated into the idea of college sports, and less people are watching professional sports. And so we were just talking about like the decline of sports in general, like the NFL and the NBA is a big one. NBA's ratings are just crashing at the moment, especially during pandemic and forward. But college sports seem to be declining at such a lower rate. Like in the last couple, especially pre-pandemic, the last couple of college football playoffs have been record-breaking college football viewership.
That's great.
And you don't see that in the other industries.
Do you think that also could be related to the political climate of those leagues as well? Because like both in the NFL and NBA, we've had people sticking up for civil rights and things like that.
That's true.
Where a lot of people who you would think like a huge demographic of those types of sports are people who are more upset about that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So they've like boycotted it. Maybe it's also hurt that industry a bit.
Well, I think a lot of people who loved watching those, and not everybody, but I could see people being upset that like, dude, I just want to watch football. I don't want this to be a political conversation. Like, just fucking throw the ball. Like,
don't try to influence me.
Yeah, like don't try to make this about something else.
I've heard that.
But you know, and the other side of the coin is like these are important issues. These are big national stages that gain a lot of influence or can showcase. And you know, we're gonna make this issue as important to us or important to a player, and you know, we're gonna use the influence to broadcast these ideas. So you know, I could see there's obviously two sides to this, or many sides, but
I haven't seen that as much in college. Maybe a little bit here and there.
You don't.
There's also so many teams that it's not like, oh, LeBron James did this. It's like,
yeah.
You know, every year or every few years we have a kind of small group of core or star college football players or basketball players or whatever, but they don't get as much press as someone who's making $100 million a year or something.
Well, you got to think about the nature of the compensation between the two. Like when you get like a $47 million deal with the Broncos, like you've made it, man. Like you now have the clout, the ability to voice your opinion and do these things. When you're in college and you're it's a dog eat dog world in college.
Oh, yeah.
Like you're competing against 10 times the amount of people from pro sports to college sports, and so really like you're worried about doing the wrong thing or saying the wrong thing. Or some players, but some players. Yeah, right.
We'll do whatever
Everybody's
the fuck
different.
They want.
Everybody's different. I mean, if you're Jameis Winston and you're a golden boy and you want to fucking and you're the Heisman Trophy winner, you can stand. Well, he felt that he could stand up on and say "fuck her right in the pussy" and get away with it, which he kind of did, which is a whole nother argument in itself of how wrong that is. But Yeah, there's always going to be those cats in the industry that.
Hey, but that brings up a good topic. I think tying Jameis's behavior back to our conversation. He's kind of been like rotten, I would say. Like he kind of just seems like he does what he wants, doesn't really think about his actions, and like some of the things he's done, like what you just brought up, are kind of outrageous. Like who does that?
Somebody who thinks their shit doesn't stink.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Or who hasn't had to change, right?
Yeah.
Like, so that's where you bring up the term rotten, where it's it's almost like kind of indicative of what are the insides like. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How much has someone had to be different or change the more gross parts of
that's the thing,
right?
That's spoiled. When you are in college football, and when college sports in general, especially college football, since there's so much money involved in it, when you're that good, you get babied. You get catered to. Like I worked before I moved out here. I worked in a basketball recruiting office doing design and graphics for recruiting basketball players. And what they would do to suck up to these players to come to their school is it blew my mind.
Right.
I mean, they were like sending them like photos of them with their faces on this and that, and like sucking up to them, bowing down, being like, please come play for us. And so I'm sure Jameis Winston was not pandered, but like was given anything he wanted, and not money obviously, but like he never really had to earn his like spot. Like he didn't have to fight for it because he's so good. And then that breeds this ego of like, well, I'm the king on the campus. I can do where the fuck I want, and there's no consequences.
Right.
And life's going well for me.
Yeah.
So do I really have to change yet?
Yeah.
Or is the way that I've been doing things making me successful?
Yeah.
Right. Until now.
Yes.
Because now he's not successful.
Well, he just got picked up by the Saints again, right? After what's his face ended up Drew Brees retired, so they picked him back up.
Retired? Oh.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Jameis's problem is he just turns the ball over too much.
Well, that's my question is, if you think of someone like Tom Brady, who seems at least to have a really consistent schedule, like what he does.
He's
really
famous
focuses
for it.
on all his skills, right? But someone like Jameis Winston, who may just be like, I'll do whatever the fuck I want today. Like, I'm so good, maybe I don't have to practice. Mm-hmm. Maybe I don't have to work on that. And maybe that's why he throws so many interceptions.
Lack of discipline.
Yeah. It's the biggest thing. I mean, Tom Brady's parallel is kind of like LeBron James, right? You talk about how much money they spend on their bodies. Mm-hmm. You talk about like the kale pajamas that Tom Brady wears at night.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But it shows the commitment to the process. And it shows that they don't overlook the process. And that like rotten inside, I love that idea. Mm-hmm. Because it's almost like a ship, right?
Yeah.
If you don't pay attention to the insides of that ship, it's going to corrode and the whole thing's coming down. So it's almost like a matter of time to where if you're just floating on your talent, it's going to catch up with you, either through injuries or through behavior or through decisions like turnovers.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of turnovers is like anticipation, research, decisions, things like that. And Tom Brady is like the best example of paying attention to that process. He pulled off something that's unprecedented in sports.
Yeah.
By going to Tampa Bay and basically pulling like a basketball power move by bringing his boys over with him.
Yeah.
In a sport that's not 5-on-5 like NBA, but there's so many more on each side of the field in football. It kind of shows that is the way to win in sports.
I mean, that was so suspicious. It seemed rigged, right?
It did.
Like Super Bowl is going to be home field advantage in Tampa this year.
Yeah.
Tom Brady moves to Tampa, signs with the Bucs, brings all his talent over to Tampa.
Should probably check the balls, make sure they're inflated.
There's something that happens when there's way too many coincidences in a row. It's kind of undeniable to where that's how conspiracy theories are. So I'm going to throw this conspiracy out that Tom Brady and the NFL have been working behind the scenes to rig the Super Bowl outcome.
Why not?
Yeah.
Or Tom Brady died last year.
Oh shit.
Right?
We're talking about alternate timelines
And now it's a robot. Right?
Tom Brady's a robot. I remember you and I used to have conversations about Tom Brady, and we would talk about how Tom Brady is like the ultimate figure of like white privilege, right?
And a lot of people look at him that way.
Yeah.
And there have been moments over his career that, just like what you're alluding to, things like the Oakland Raiders strip sack fumble play, which we don't need to get into and divulge, too much from. But a lot of people look at him that way.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are not wrong in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Compared to someone who made it out the mud, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Single parent family,
right?
Not being a white male in the United States.
Yeah, right. Right.
Like, that's a good head start.
Yeah.
That you get.
Not bad.
And it might also bring the finish line closer in both ways.
6 Super Bowls later.
Yeah.
7 Super Bowls. Yeah.
I just watched that documentary on Netflix about the college entrance.
The college admission scandal?
Yeah, admission scandal. Rick Singer was the guy who ran the whole operation.
Yeah.
And this conversation reminds me exactly of that, because it's like, and they pointed out like several times in the documentary, they say these people who have the largest advantage out of everyone else in the world had to cheat.
That's what was so staggering to me too. I'm like, really? You had to pay how much to get your kid into college? Almost like twice the amount that you would pay for the tuition to get into this place.
Right.
Is it really worth it at that point?
It's
I don't
crazy.
understand. You're this person. Your kid doesn't need to go to college to begin with. Like,
yeah. So the documentary actually put some of the blame, which I'm not sure if I agree with this or not, but they put some of the blame on the colleges and say that the colleges have made this environment where it's like, if my child doesn't go to Harvard or if my child doesn't go to Stanford, then they're nobody or whatever
this
it is.
Timeline is just messed up forever.
Yeah.
For that poor child.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's
And
no other lives they can live.
So it's kind of interesting because I think in some social circles, that's totally true. It's like, oh, your kid didn't get in, or your kid didn't go there, or you didn't, or whatever it is, and it's awkward. But
yeah,
makes me sad.
There's definitely like, it's like a pedigree or a hierarchy, or not, for lack of a better word, I guess I'm not. It's not coming to me, but the alma mater matters to a lot of families.
Mm-hmm.
We're a Stanford family. Like you go into Stanford. There's no it's ands or buts about it. Did you guys hear about I think it was Harvard was like making it harder for Asian Americans to get accepted?
There was a lawsuit, but I don't know what came out of that.
Yeah, I heard about that, and I thought that was interesting because it's like you would think it was like that demographic was more like they're considered a minority. So I know colleges make a exerted effort to
bring in more
for
marginalized
diversity
groups.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
And this is like the first case of that being
in
modern times, like flipped, where it's like, oh, we're gonna make it harder for these kids because they're so smart and they're excelling so well, that like, they're killing it. Like, so we need to make it a little harder for them to. Yeah, you should look this up because I may be talking right out of my ass.
Yeah, it was Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard, which was in 2014.
Interesting.
Yeah, but let's see. We can probably find out what this decision was, that it was paused until 2016, but it went up to the Supreme Court apparently. But they said that they did not discriminate against Asian Americans was the verdict.
Okay, well that's good.
But the fact that it went so
Harvard.
far and made news headlines almost is to your point.
When I went to Boston to visit Myles while he was living there, I went to like, what's the place? Where's is it not? It's not Cambridge. Cambridge is the area where it's at.
Yeah.
We would go hang out there and like pretend we were at Harvard, and like hang out and do
or
like
Harvard,
hang out on the steps of the library and like eat a salad and be like, what's going on? Like, hey,
Yeah.
oh, you going to econ? Cool.
Yeah.
I'm just taking a lunch break. The mess hall was closed today, so. But yeah, no, that's all interesting. So you did the esports thing, you retired from that, and then now you're back at your roots.
Yeah, so I'm back doing behavior therapy for people with developmental disabilities, mostly autism. Now my age group is more 4 to 12, so more kids in early adolescence now.
Okay.
Yeah. So I kind of learned how to do the job before esports, and now I've come back, I've refreshed, and I've picked it back up.
Is there anything that you learned during your tenure in esports that you can now take and apply to what you're doing now?
Hell yeah. Practice, man.
Yeah.
Practice is the best. I talk and think about practice, and it's solidified it so crystal clear for me that practice is usually just like the answer to most problems. If you're working on it, if you're with someone and they need to change a behavior or they need to improve like a skill that they have, you can only improve that skill by practicing.
Okay, so I'm sure that's true to a degree, but I play Rocket League all the time, and I feel like I'm not getting better.
Well, and it depends on what you're doing when you play, right?
Okay.
Are you just...
Good point.
Are you testing theories and circling back to see if you were right?
Right. So if I'm just brute forcing, like play, just hit the ball, whatever, then I'm not going to get any better. But if I'm like, okay, I notice that when I do this, I do it wrong, and I need to practice on that one thing, and then that I'll get better at that.
Yeah. Or you could be like, hey, there's this one part of this game that I suck at, and I'm going to try to contrive 20 scenarios for that situation, and we'll see how many out of 20 I get right, or I perform the way that I hope to.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And then you could look at the end of the day and be like, I was 4 for 20. I was 19 for 20. I was 10 for 20. You know what I mean? So some of that is having a more structured approach, or even you could even make if you want to like have like a gaming session, you want it to be valuable for you. You could even go into it being like, what if I try and I just base the way that I play this game off of this one central theory, even if it's bad, and I just stick to it and I commit to it, and you'll see by the end, okay, this is bad like I thought it would be, but I've learned these 6 tangible things because I've committed to this and I've gotten my ass kicked all day.
Yeah.
That you can then, the next day that you play, be like, okay, well, I'm not doing that major theory, but maybe I'll do something that I think is more successful, but I'll still take these takeaways from yesterday.
I think that's the problem with playing competitive all the time, is you feel...
You got to be willing to lose.
Yeah.
You got to be really willing to lose and not have your ego so wrapped up and fragile in it.
Yeah, or like my teammates yelling at me.
Yeah, right. And a lot of it on the internet is silencing motherfuckers.
Yeah.
That are going to put you in a bad mood or just be, bad teammates to you or whatever. Just hit them with the ignore button.
Yeah,
straight up.
I'm going to mute Chase next time.
Yeah. Logan, shout out to you.
Yeah. Stop being mean to me.
It's true. We were talking about like streaming, right?
Yeah.
Physical sports players can't stream themselves playing their sport. But when you're playing sports on the internet, you can. So it's not like Steph Curry is just going to stream himself. I feel like he would make bank.
Yeah.
If he could just like, that would almost turn it into like Steph Curry's ball handling camp, but it's just on his Twitch channel, right? Where he's like showing all the like crazy ball handling stuff, like things that he does, that people will find entertaining.
Yeah. You know what he could make big on though is Steph Curry playing Steph Curry on 2K and streaming that.
That's really funny.
People would love to watch that.
And I actually bet players. I bet that's a thing.
Yes.
Probably. I don't know, but I bet that's a thing.
Yeah.
Because I know sports players talk about those games.
Yeah.
They get upset when their rating is lower than they think it should be. Or they have certain players that they like to play as,
Yep.
Like I remember there was a when I was playing Madden growing up, there was this player named Michael Vick who got in.
Yes, Michael Vick. QB. Yeah. Eagles,
Falcons, right.
Got in trouble for some cockfighting or dogfighting, right?
Yeah. The way that his game was super fun to play with in video games.
And that exists across sports. There are certain types of players or teams that everyone wants to play as.
Yeah.
And even the pro players in the NBA or in the NFL, they know that.
Yes.
And they play as Michael Vick or something.
Yeah.
They're like, wait, his game was like just overpowered in video games terms, so why wouldn't I play that?
That's so true. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
Imagine being Steph Curry and then and turning on that video game and playing as yourself. That's got to be so surreal for him, for anybody in that position.
It's like, I don't move my arm like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I got it all wrong. I got my nose all wrong.
I'm sure that they,
I'm gonna send a. Hey, can you contact my manager and let 2K know that they got my face all wrong?
Yeah, or like, yo, I never missed from that spot.
Yeah.
This video game's wrong.
Yeah,
I just missed. When I'm in this corner, I don't miss.
They don't know
He sues
I'm
them.
97% from the corner.
Yeah,
Bitches.
I'm 99% from this corner since I was 7 years old.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So interesting. So what do you? So you're back working with kids with disabilities. Is this what's your long term? What do you feel is like your 10-year plan? That sounds so like cliche to ask, but like I'm always interested to see what's next for you.
Yeah, we
in the
need
field.
a behavioral person for the podcast, so we're interviewing.
Well, and a big part of what I do is creating theories for behavior and being totally wrong. So that's a big part of it
There
too.
you go. Yeah.
You got to be willing to be wrong, right?
Mhm.
Being willing to lose, being
Yeah.
willing to get your butt kicked, all these things. So it's also theorizing what you think a behavior would be a function of a behavior, and being like, "Whoa, I was way wrong about that."
Like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Nope.
But it's also knowing to check back in with yourself, right? So after that day of playing your games, checking back in, what have I learned? What have I taken away? Or checking back in, was my theory of the function of this behavior right? It's so easy to not do those check-ins and for you to take no lessons away from what you've been doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Anyway, so I mean, when you say 10-year plan, my first thought is what Ariel and I are going to be doing.
Yeah.
We want to have a kid soon.
Right.
And so part of why I like my job is it's prepping me for parenting in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
You know?
Patience.
It's at least desensitizing me for a lot of the really gross stuff that I hear about that's going to just hit us like a train.
Yeah.
You know? So that's kind of...
Are you also going to wear a face shield when you have a kid too?
I got to just take it on.
Yeah.
Luckily now I don't need gloves for a lot of that gross stuff.
Yeah. But do you see yourself doing what you're doing now, like till you retire, or you want to be a manager in that type of industry, or run your own clinic, or is there any like big goals that you have in mind for yourself?
The only thing I would say that it's really missing, and you and I talked a little bit about this yesterday, Chase, is I don't have a competitive outlet right now. And I'm a happier, nicer, better person when I have that outlet to compete. So that's something that I don't currently get with my work. It's, you could sometimes be like, this treatment team that I'm on for this patient, we're the best treatment team that our company has to offer. But it's like, well, but that can also get in your way if you think about it in those terms, too often. So that's not really a great way to compete. So that's something that I do feel like is missing. But the things that I really like about my job is, one, I've been in the trenches working with kids with really dangerous behaviors and things like that before. So I know how it feels. I can empathize. It's made me a better manager and a better supervisor for younger people and younger generations. And I really like developing people. I really like talent development now. And because I did coaching for 4 years, I'm good at coaching now. I'm good at giving people instant feedback. You know what I mean?
That's awesome.
I'm good at reinforcing the behaviors of staff that work with me to be like, wait, you did this incredible thing. Or I'll think internally like, this person that I'm supervising Myles. He did this incredible thing and I witnessed it. If I don't praise him and let him know that I noticed it and make him feel good about what he had just done, he may not be as likely to do it again in the future. And I want to make sure that he does. So I'm going to try to give him some type of positive consequence that feels good to him that will more likely make him do that again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what talent development is. It's just influencing.
It's like how you train a dog or something, right?
Well, kind of.
Right?
Yeah,
Dude,
I mean,
when he got his dog, I remember. Well, you had her when I met you, but he was applying. I remember you being like, yeah, I'm working with her on this, and I'm doing like some similar things that I do in my work with Gertie.
It's all behavior science.
Yeah, and to making her,
parenting, dog training.
Yeah, because if you want to, teaching them to do a trick, for instance, you would teach them by giving them some kind of positive reinforcement after, like a treat or however.
You'd shape the approximations to whatever the trick is, to where the dog is like, oh, if I do this, now I get this tangible thing that I want. But then I do this, and they don't need to know why.
Yeah.
right?
But then eventually that makes them feel good.
Yeah.
Like they'll get what they want.
Or they want this delicious thing, right? And they're kind of deprived of that thing, so it's not like they're overly satiated.
That's why you keep giving me treats when we hang out. Every time I do something.
Yeah, it's that conditioning of Matt equals treats. Hang out with Matt more.
Yeah.
But yeah, we did things like that with my dog growing up, to where we would get in trouble if someone found that we had her, so we wouldn't let her bark or vocalize when we were younger, or when she was young. And so now she's just kind of a quieter dog.
Yeah. I've noticed that. Yeah.
That's like one example.
So how do you feel about hitting children or animals?
Like corporal punishment and things like that. The interesting thing is, when it's your child, you can have more of an opinion on that. When you work in healthcare like me, you can't have any opinion.
Yeah, you can't hit somebody.
It's just a no-no.
Yeah.
And you couldn't do that in coaching either. If I had a player that like missed their assignment, I couldn't like flap them,
backhand them.
Yeah.
Do better.
You wish you could, because there's the immediacy, right? But a good example is if Gertie does something. Gertie is my boxer, 6-year-old boxer, just an absolute goon. Say she would never. She's never bitten Ariel ever. But say she bites Ariel. I'm not going to allow that ever.
Yeah.
I'm going to provide some type of really fast, immediate, negative, aversive consequence immediately following that behavior. Yeah. To almost let her know bad stuff happens to you if you do that thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To where maybe one smack, like one, you'd have to like operationalize what the corporal punishment would be.
Mm-hmm.
How many thwacks? You know what I mean? Like I had my own spoon growing up.
Yeah.
I had my own spoon with my own name on it.
And soap.
And
wait, it had your name on it?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
God damn.
And I knew some people that were like, if they
branded.
would, like if they would get like bok growing up, if they get like spanking or whatever,
Let me see your ass cheek. Let's just see.
Their spoon would have like added rhinestones the more spankings they got.
Oh,
or things like that.
Shit.
Right?
So when you got your spoon whacked on you, did it make a little imprint of Matthew?
No, but that would be pretty good.
They took out the engraver.
Yeah. So that stuff is totally off the table at work, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what work has helped show me is basically there's the reason that stuff works. As long as you are always under emotional control, that's the biggest part.
Right.
Yeah.
You better be under emotional control. What's interesting is I even did research when I was learning about behavior psych with my main professor at school, who is like a Mormon professor. And it surprised me when I learned that he used corporal punishment at home. But he did it in such a non-emotional way that it was almost like it was contingencies. Well, if you do this really crazy whack behavior, you're going to have to do this, or this is going to happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
The thing between like kids and dogs is like if you could be like, with a kid, you could be like, if you did this, now you have to go do a chore or do this thing. Mm-hmm. You can't do that with a dog.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they don't understand it. But does a kid understand it?
You could be like, oh, you don't get to go out to the dog park, and also, like, that doesn't even work because unless you do it directly after, the dog doesn't understand why he's getting punished, or they don't make the connection between the action and the consequence,
You
right?
need the immediacy.
The immediacy is important.
The immediate, even within, if you say that my shirt looks great, and like you say something really nice like that, and I love when you tell me comments like that.
Yeah, by the way, your shirt is fantastic.
Boom, Insta chocolate.
Yeah.
Like if I give you that chocolate within 1 second of you doing that behavior compared to 5 minutes later, hugely different power in how it impacts your behavior in the future. Now you're a really smart adult, right? You can have really elongated reinforcement schedules.
Yeah.
Like you go to work and then you get your paycheck. But when you're an animal or
a human with a developmental disability where your understanding is just way lower, the immediacy matters way more. So that's why, like, for example, if Gertie gets in the trash when we're at work, but we missed it, we don't know if she did it at 8 a.m. when we come home at 7 p.m. or if she did it 10 minutes before. We can't punish her because we don't know if she's forgotten hours ago.
Yeah.
She may just be like, Dad's home and he's a dick. And so now he's like parading me around, you know, holding my collar and yelling at me. And
some dogs know though, right?
And some will know,
do.
and some will know that when there's all this trash and all this shit in the middle of the room, if I cower, maybe they'll even take it easy on me.
Yeah. You ever see those videos online of like, okay, there's like 3 dogs sitting next to each other and like,
they're
who
so
did
cute.
it? Who did it? And one of them's like, you know, like still happy. The other one's like still happy. And the other one's like,
Just
what? Yeah. What is going on?
I'm not available.
Yeah. I'm not even gonna look at you. I can't even make eye contact. They make eye contact for like a brief moment and then look back down. Like, nope.
Yeah.
Please.
So the immediacy of providing a consequence to a behavior is like the biggest part.
Yeah.
And if you miss if your dog's not supposed to get in the trash, like the rare moments when your dog gets in the trash and you catch them.
Oh, it's so great when you do,
right? You
You
shouldn't lean into it too much and take too much pride in it
No
or joy in
emotion.
it. You really shouldn't take any pride or joy in it.
You shouldn't, but it's
you
great
can.
because you're like, fucking finally, out of all the time, like 10 times this has happened, and I've never been around to witness it. Now I'm like, fucking finally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's when I want to get serious about this too, because I think some people, this is even just a taboo topic.
Yeah, it is.
To just talk
It's very
about it.
controversial. Yeah.
And in those moments, that's when it's hardest to keep your emotions in check. You finally caught a behavior that you can provide punishment to immediately following. And whatever the animal or the human is, they're likely going to tie that behavior with this consequence as a contingency. Not doing 2 hits when you told yourself you'd do 1. Not putting extra weight into a hit. You know what I mean?
You're not doing it to like
for you.
hurt the animal.
You're not doing it for you
You
at all.
need to remove the emotional component to it. It's like when
It's not how dare they do this to me. It's
yeah.
Let's make sure that they don't do this. Make the same choice.
Yeah, I'm helping you not
Make a better decision.
to make a better decision. So
Yeah.
So a good example for a real life practice is like when you get an email from somebody you don't like, for instance, or somebody who is like being a dick to you, and you want to like on purpose, and you know that, and you want to immediately be like per conversation, and I always like tell people like you should take like 2 steps back, like take 5 minutes, like leave that in your inbox, take 5 minutes, do something else, and then come back to it. And you will immediately feel less
Crazy
emotional about, and you take the emotion out of the response, and you can effectively communicate. Like communication starts to break down when our humanistic tendencies get in the way.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
Like I find that be in anything, not just your workplace, but in marriage is a good example too. Like I've been married, I've been in a relationship for 10 years, and I find that one of the biggest roadblocks in communicating with my wife, my partner, is when emotions involved.
Yeah.
And you know, we recognize in each other like I just need to cool down, or like, hey, like I know you want to talk about this right now, but like maybe we should like watch TV and then make time to talk about it, because then it allows us to cool. Maybe we were thinking about it more, then we can develop more reasonable actions and reasonable communications to solve the issue at hand.
I've always had that same theory as well.
Yeah.
Like that's how I've always for work, for my relationship, and not just with my wife but with anyone, like family members or anything. Anytime I'm upset about something, of course it's not like 100% of the time, so it happens, but I just like exactly what you just said, is just cool down, and you sometimes I don't even think about that at all anymore.
Really?
And then I come back to it. Yeah.
You just conditioned yourself to react in that way.
Yeah. And like I don't often, at least I don't think I do, get super angry about things because I think I've done that so much where I'll just stop and like cool off, think about something else, try to rationalize my thinking. And then, it's 99% of the time, it's a better experience afterward.
I do have to say, Myles is one of the most level-headed people I know.
Oh,
I don't think I've ever seen Myles get angry, like viscerally, physically looking angry.
Was he always like that?
He does it in the closet. He's a closeted angry person, probably.
No, I don't think I've always been that way. I probably started being that way, like after college, maybe. Maybe when I started working.
It's a good time to add that skill. That's a critical thinking skill, right? Being like, am I tripping about this short term?
Yeah.
Do I have an energy that's going to fall away from this and make me more rational after?
Because that's what I've always thought of is, like, I'll see people, to bring up relationships again, who will yell at each other and say horrible things. And I'm like, how can you be with that person or live with that person after saying those kind of things to them, or like having that kind of fight with someone? It would permanently hurt my relationship with them.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is,
surface. Some of that stuff
you can't unsay words.
Yeah. So then I thought about, if I don't do that, then I'll have a better life, because I'll like my relationship with people more, and I won't have bad memories
that you regret.
Yeah.
Or that they hold against you when you should have just kept your trap shut for 10 minutes.
Because anytime, you always do regret it.
Yeah, it's like a lot of, it sounds selfish, but a lot of the reasons why some people do things is not because they understand the way that it will affect somebody else, but the way, like, they will have to think about it for the rest of their life. Like, if I do this, I'm gonna have to live with the feeling of regret.
We were talking about training
for the rest
earlier.
of my life.
We were talking about training and preparing earlier with sports.
Yeah.
Right?
That's how I think about everything too. Like, when I'm on a hike, we're doing an activity where I think, like, if I do this thing, I'll break my leg. Or there's some potential where I could break my leg. Or when I talk to people, I think sometimes I have a hard time speaking about things, because my brain's always thinking, like, if I say it this way, then what are the consequences of every way you can do something? And but going back to
Matt does that a lot too.
Yeah?
He thinks about it in the way of, like, the multiverse. He's like, he always talks about, like, you know, in the universe where I did this, Errol and I would be doing this.
Go to a different timeline. That's like my
in timeline 12B-A.
Because you know that your life could have been very different, very easily from what all of our 3 lives are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The slightest change of, like, one choice that we made could have set us down a different path. So I think it's easy to imagine that.
Yeah.
Although you can get too hung up on that.
Yeah.
And that creates an indecisive person, and nobody likes that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's hard to balance that.
You got to balance kind of going with the flow, as well as kind of being careful.
Yeah.
Thinking about how something, which is one thing when we're talking about corporal punishment, some people say that the death penalty is not effective because people who would get the death penalty usually aren't, like, more rational people, or they don't think about the result of something. Like, I may think of, even if I wanted to kill somebody or whatever, or if I'm in the heat of the moment, like, I may think, if I killed this person right now, I could get the death penalty or go to prison for the rest of my life, where someone who's not as rational may just not really think about the consequence.
Impulsive right through that.
Yeah.
And that happens. Unfortunately.
And so when we're talking about, like, an animal needing that immediate response to something, I think those type of people are the example of that. Like, they need the immediate response of, I just did something bad, not to do it again. Not like, I did something bad, now I get caught, now I go to prison, 50 years later they execute me.
Yeah, and in a lot of instances, it's not necessarily about, like, a consequence of something. It's to protect the public. Like, if you remove this person who is likely to do it
prison,
again, remove it from society, that it's more of a, like, protection for society, and
The
less of
reoffending is a big part of it.
Yeah. I want to get a shout out to somebody. Can I give a shout out to somebody?
Yeah.
On Kit.
Starbucks.
You gonna shout out to Ankit? Ankit, if you're listening, we've been talking about you often. We miss you. Hope you. We should. Myles, you don't know who Ankit is.
No.
Bless. You're not living if you've never met Ankit.
Damn.
I had to say, Ankit, can you please come out here so you can get on this podcast? We're gonna get you on.
He'd love that.
That's all I have to say.
He's the best of
that.
us.
Yes,
is what I would say.
He's an
he
alien.
real?
He's
like
not,
you guys
he
are
is
just
not
talking
human.
about.
No, we're actually telling the truth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's an alien. That's all I have to say.
He's one of those guys that's oftentimes impossibly good. And you hope that that the world doesn't change him and make him different over time. You know what I mean?
You
Yeah.
could preserve a version of Ankit in formaldehyde.
And that's not to say that he's like this cute thing that we want to control. But it's like, I do think that he's a much better person than a lot of humans I've come across.
Yeah.
And that's not a thing of like being raised right, but I think it's kind of just the way you are and the morals and the ethics that each of us have.
That's true.
You know?
Well, we're almost at 2 hours. 5 minutes away from being at 2 hours. Oh my
Right,
god.
now we gotta kill 5 minutes.
No. Thanks for being on, man. Really appreciate
Thanks.
it.
This was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I was relieved to hear that you were excited about being on, because I wasn't sure if you were like, nah, I don't really want to, but like,
Yeah, we've been talking about it for months.
yeah, I was like,
Cause
my buddy's Matt's going to
Yeah.
come out. I'm excited. We're going to get him on.
Yeah,
We're
we
gonna
were
talk.
like, oh, we can talk about like the esports thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's fascinating.
I know some weird stuff. And I feel like I'm kind of a unique, weird person for being a white male in America, which we've already talked about. Now we kind of have to, as like white men, we have to readdress our privilege every so often just to kind of stay safe.
Yeah.
But I think in like some of the things that we've been talking about today, it shows that I'm kind of different.
Yeah.
In like how I villainized my people who could have been my work peers, for example. You know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
like how I look at certain things of behavior or like what's important in my life. So I've experienced some interesting and weird work situations.
Yeah. What is do you have do you have like an instance where it's the weirdest work story from esports? Can you give due diligence to that question?
Weirdest.
Most notable, maybe,
Man,
for
like if
our listeners.
Like if I can think back on one thing that just being from the inside, yeah, I mean, I guess I think of travel experiences. So like I work with my teams do well, my players kick ass. We do well enough that we get invited to international competitions and tournaments and games and things like that. So I was able to go to like Berlin, I was able to go to like Korea.
Wow.
And in Korea, I'm way taller than most people. I look different from most people. But Korea's culture was really interesting too, learning about that. You know what I mean? Like one thing that was weird that stood off right off the bat for me was like, I was like, if there's a bus that goes by, the advertisements on that bus might be like face cleaning products, for example.
Okay.
And the advertisements for those things in Korean culture will be like really damning toward people who have like gross skin and need face cleaning products. They'll be like, if you have acne, you're disgusting.
Yeah.
And
You're
you
fucking
need
gross human
and we're
being.
going to create on your face on this advertisement, we're going to create disgusting little like faced pimples
Yes.
to show how gross you are and how much you need our product. So
Did
like,
you ever see that with weight loss type of stuff?
there
over
was stuff like that
there? You
as well.
fatty, lose some weight.
What?
Piece of shit. You would never see that in America nowadays.
Right.
Yeah. It's very PC.
Right. Or like I know of some Korean players that couldn't get jobs because they have like acne scars, which is a really interesting cultural thing there. So even just having like scarring from that, and there's traditional like cultural roots to that of like class systems and things like that.
Beauty.
Yeah.
Plays a role in it. Yeah.
But yeah, basically while I was in Korea, I knew how to, I forget one of these now, but I basically just said, I'm sorry and thank you all the time in Korean to anyone who was willing to help me. I tried to just smile to look friendly so people would be more willing to help me.
Yeah.
That's what I do when I travel too.
Yeah.
Right?
Just
Yeah.
look as harmless as possible, and people will be nice to you.
Yep.
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah.
I think.
You think you're like maybe, or they're just laughing like, look at this poor son of a bitch.
This polar bear walking through Seoul, Korea.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, he's so disgusting.
But Korea is, is interesting how many like looks I got there, or what people would assume about me. But it's one of my favorite places to go, and I really hope I can go again before I die.
Yeah, for those of you who are listening, Matt is he looks like he could have played baseball, or not baseball, basketball. You're a tall,
I was a water polo
dude.
player.
Yeah.
So I'm like 6'3", 230 or something.
Yep.
Not
single, so ladies, calm down. Yeah,
it's over.
That's interesting. What else about Korea did you find really different from America?
They had an interesting sewer system. Like
what?
Yeah, like you'd have to do, like, this is graphic, but like if you go to a public restroom, you have to like wipe and then throw it in the trash.
Yeah.
Rather than flushing.
Yeah. That's in a lot of Asian countries.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's why things like bidets are like more prevalent. Things like that. That was another interesting
Like in
one.
Thailand, you would go to the bathroom and usually they don't have toilet paper. It's just a hose. Like
There
not
we
even
go.
a bidet, but like a hose connected to the
I don't
wall.
know about that. Man, I bet you're right.
In some parts of Korea, I bet they have that. Where it's not as maybe
I'd be walking out of
the
there
more rural
waddling like,
areas.
how do I get the wet to go away?
Yeah.
Like, I've got a wet problem.
I wondered that too.
Yeah.
It's just swapped
Which
it
is
out
why-
for a different thing that I'm not down with.
It's like
You don't take a shit in one of those places. You have to find a nicer place that offers the luxury of toilet paper.
Yeah. You know what was another interesting thing about Korea was like if you're an attractive person physically, older generations will come over to you and they'll compliment you and tell you that. They'll be like,
really?
You're so handsome. And then you'll have to, I don't know what the desired response is. Yeah, it's like, thanks, you too. Like, oh, wait, that's...
You're beautiful as well
like,
on the
thanks,
inside.
my parents did a good job, or like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
My wife likes for me to keep a beard. I don't...
Neutrogena. Go get yourself some. Yeah.
So just, I guess, some cultural things with beauty was interesting in Korea.
Wow. So they have a high appreciation for aesthetic.
It seems like it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe that, I wonder if that will change. In the same way that it's kind of changed in America, like body image.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. I certainly feel for I had acne growing up, and my family did as well. Like, my siblings all did.
Mm-hmm.
So I could feel for the kids growing up in Korea with shit like that, where it's like, dude, I'm washing my face as much as I can. I'm not like an unclean person.
Yeah, bro, I try.
And I'm just trying to get a job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel for those people.
Yeah, that kind of sucks.
Yeah.
That's where, like, love or hate, the acceptance, like, or like, I don't know, the attitude change in America. It has opened up or made people feel more comfortable in their own skin. And I could see living over there and dealing with that issues, and where they kind of haven't caught up to where the way America feels or deals with those issues.
Especially in that part of the world where tradition is so much more important
for them,
than in other
and
parts
it should
of the world.
be. I think preserving the cultural.
There's way more history.
Yeah,
compared to the West.
There's an importance I think we need to preserve in that, and a lot of people are afraid of that with globalization and stuff, and I'm sure somebody over in Korea is worried about American culturals invading their way of doing things, or
It's everywhere. Yeah.
German ways of doing things, and or wherever. That's what makes America so interesting, is the meshing and melting pot of all these different cultures. Like, I don't think anywhere else in the world you can get that. Right? You can't, like, you go over to Germany. I'm sure there's parts of Germany's where they're
it's changing. But to Matt's point, it's like in the U.S. we have hundreds of years of people from all around the world came here, so we have hundreds of years of the different cultures meshing. And then if you go to like Germany, in Germany you have tons of different people now. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of Middle Eastern people have moved there, and just people from other parts of Europe. But you have thousands of years of the Germanic
way of doing
cultural
things.
Yeah. And so there you probably have a lot more people. Like here in America, you have people like, this is America, this is how things are. Like nothing should ever change.
Which is ironic because it is a result of all these different cultures coming together, right? Yeah.
Continuously evolving, getting hopefully better. But then you have the other countries where you have people who are like, this has been our history for a really long time. But I think from what some of my coworkers, like I have a coworker in Italy, and the way he explained it to me, he said that a lot of the older Italians are more like kind of like how people are here, where it's just they don't really want to see things change because they've been living for 60 years.
They're proud people.
Yeah, it's like, this is how I liked it. I don't want other cultures coming in. But he said like more of the younger people who haven't been alive as long are wanting to see more different culture. So, give it more time and globalization will continue to go and go. But we have a lot of countries like Korea or India has like a huge caste system.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I call it racism, but
they call it
that's what homie could talk about.
Yeah, it's very true.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think some countries will take a really long time before we see stuff like that. But then like a lot of the Western world, I think, is really kind of more like
accepting of it.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
It benefits my life. Now on Thanksgiving, or now if Aaron and I have like a holiday we want to celebrate, we're wondering what kind of food we get, we'll go get Korean barbecue.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's
like
so good.
we wouldn't have come across that if we lived in a different country, or found like we do that like almost every Tuesday.
It's amazing what we have
on
here.
our day off.
Yeah. Korean barbecue day.
That's what's cool about moving around a lot in the U.S. or living in cities. Like if you live in New York, you can get so many different types of food.
Oh, so many.
Yeah. That like if you just say Chinese food, like different types of Chinese food too. Right?
Yeah, they're like, well, what kind of Chinese food do you want? Like, there's different types. Yes, Panda Express is not the only type of Chinese food, and that's not even Chinese food. You stupid American.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff.
Cool. We have it good here.
We do. Too good. Again, thanks for being on.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks
I
for
really
having me.
appreciate it. You were great. I will have you back on, of course, anytime you come to visit. We'll keep chatting about your career and how that's going and stuff, and checking to see how Gertie is.
Hell yeah. Cheers to the lucky duck.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Thanks for listening in. Thanks for watching. Until next time, every 2 weeks, catch up. Oh, if you guys like the show, hit subscribe.
Yeah.
Pound that like button. Do all the things you need to do to give us a little bit of praise. That helps us reach more people. Review us on iTunes. Give us a thumbs up on Facebook or wherever you're listening. Then we really appreciate it. We appreciate you guys. Yeah, and catch up with us every 2 weeks. That's what we're doing here on the show. So until then, adios.